Your lack of results is not caused by poor strategy, but by an undeveloped inner identity that isn't aligned with success. Most people spend their lives chasing new plans, new systems, and new formulas, believing that the next tactic will finally unlock the breakthrough they've been waiting for, yet they overlook the truth that the greatest limitation is not external, but internal. Strategy becomes irrelevant when the person using it doesn't believe they are capable, worthy, or prepared to execute it with consistency and conviction. A brilliant plan in the hands of someone who doubts themselves will always lose to an average plan in the hands of someone who knows who they are and what they're capable of becoming. When your identity is misaligned with success, every opportunity becomes filtered through self-doubt. You hesitate, you overthink, you question your ability, and you sabotage your progress long before results have a chance to show up. You think you need more information, but what you actually need is internal transformation. You can try to push yourself forward, but your subconscious will always pull you back to the person you currently believe yourself to be. This is why some people work hard but never move forward. Their internal identity refuses to allow results they haven't grown into. Your identity shapes your actions more than motivation ever will. Motivation can spark movement, but identity sustains it. If your identity says you are inconsistent, then no matter how inspired you feel, you will eventually default to inconsistency. If your identity says you are someone who quits under pressure, you will find a reason to quit even when the path is clear. Your results are not an accident. They are the natural expression of who you believe you are on the inside. When the internal narrative shifts, the external outcomes begin to shift with it. People often think they need to fix their circumstances, but what they really need to fix is their self-perception. Circumstances change when the person navigating them changes. A strong identity sees challenges as training, not threats. A weak identity sees challenges as confirmation of inadequacy. The same event can break one person and build another. And the difference is not strategy, but identity. Until you elevate how you see yourself, you will always interpret life from a limited perspective that restricts your potential. Your mind operates like an internal thermostat, set to a specific level of success you believe you deserve. You can temporarily push beyond it with effort and excitement, but eventually you will drift back down to the internal setting you have not yet rewritten. This is why people self-sabotage. After achieving a small level of progress, they are unconsciously returning to the level they feel is normal for them. To rise and stay elevated, you must raise the internal standard you live by, not just the goals you write on paper. An identity not aligned with success often hides behind logic and excuses. It will tell you the timing isn't right, or you need more information, or the risk is too high, or you're not ready yet. These thoughts feel responsible, but they are actually the protective mechanisms of an identity that fears expansion. Success requires stepping beyond who you currently are, and your identity will resist anything unfamiliar because it interprets discomfort as danger. Until you recognize this pattern, you will keep mistaking fear for wisdom. Expanding your identity means confronting the beliefs you've been carrying for years. Beliefs shaped by past failures, limiting environments, and voices that told you what you couldn't do. These beliefs form invisible walls around your potential, and no strategy can override a belief system built on limitation. Transformation begins when you question those beliefs, challenge their origin, and intentionally rewrite them based on who you want to become rather than who you used to be. When your identity grows, your habits begin to shift naturally. You no longer have to force discipline. It becomes a reflection of who you are becoming. You no longer avoid challenges. You pursue them because they validate your new expanded self. You no longer look for shortcuts. You embrace the process because it reinforces the identity you are building. This is why some people rise quickly once the identity shifts. They're no longer fighting themselves, only the obstacles in front of them. As your identity aligns with success, you begin to interpret failure differently. It no longer feels like proof that you're unqualified, but evidence that you are in the process of becoming someone greater. You start viewing setbacks as lessons and resistance as training. With this shift, even the strategies you once thought weren't working suddenly begin producing results because the person using them has changed. Strategy becomes powerful only after identity becomes solid. True growth happens when you stop trying to upgrade the plan and start upgrading the person. The moment you elevate your identity, everything else begins to rise with it. Your standards, your habits, your decisions, your resilience, and your capacity to take action. The external world responds to who you believe you are internally, and when your identity matches the level of success you desire, results flow as a natural expression of the person you've become. Success requires transforming yourself, not just improving your tactics. Identity drives behavior, and behavior drives outcomes. People often chase better strategies because they believe success is found in the mechanics, yet the mechanics only matter when the person using them is prepared to execute with consistency and conviction. You can give two people the same blueprint and one will flourish while the other flounders, not because the strategy changed, but because the identities behind the actions were not the same. When you focus solely on tactics, you're polishing the surface while ignoring the foundation beneath it. Most people treat success like a technical problem, thinking that if they just learn more, plan more, or optimize more, everything will fall into place, yet their results continue to repeat the same patterns. The reason is simple. You cannot rise above the story you tell yourself about who you are. If you identify as someone who hesitates, even the best plan cannot compensate for your lack of action. If you identify as someone who gives up easily, no strategy can save you from quitting when things get uncomfortable. Your identity silently governs every move you make. Real transformation begins when you stop asking, what should I do? And start asking, who do I need to become? That single shift in focus changes the way you show up. Instead of trying to force discipline, you operate from a new identity that naturally chooses discipline. Instead of fighting procrastination, you become someone who follows through because it aligns with who you are becoming. When your identity shifts, your behaviors begin to align without constant internal battles. Behavior is nothing more than identity expressed through action. Every choice you make is a vote for the person you believe yourself to be. If your identity tells you that you're capable, you act boldly. If your identity tells you that you're unworthy, you play small. If your identity tells you that you're resilient, you push through obstacles. If your identity tells you that you're fragile, you retreat at the first sign of discomfort. The external world simply mirrors the internal commitments you've made to yourself. Many people think they lack motivation, but what they truly lack is alignment between who they want to be and who they currently believe they are. Motivation is fleeting, but identity is permanent until you deliberately rewrite it. When your identity supports your goals, you don't need to constantly hype yourself up or negotiate with your emotions. You simply act because acting is part of who you are. Success becomes a natural extension of your self-concept rather than a forced performance. Transformation requires honesty, the kind that forces you to confront the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. It means acknowledging the behaviors that have held you back and tracing them to the identity that created them. Maybe you see yourself as someone who always struggles, or someone who never finishes what they start, or someone who isn't meant for greatness. As long as those beliefs remain unchallenged, your actions will always align with them. The behaviors you dislike are symptoms of the identity you've accepted. As you begin to transform your identity, your relationship with effort changes. You stop looking for shortcuts and start valuing growth. You stop asking for the easy path and start embracing the path that builds your character. The discomfort that once scared you becomes the very signal that you're evolving. You start to realize that the internal transformation is more valuable than any external win, because once you become the person capable of achieving success, you can recreate it in any area of your life. Your behaviors begin to follow a different rhythm when your identity expands. You rise earlier, stay focused longer, push yourself harder, and refuse to settle for mediocrity, because the NU version of you demands a higher standard. You don't allow your feelings to dictate your actions because you've outgrown the identity that once needed comfort to function. You show up even when it's hard, because showing up validates who you are becoming. Outcomes are the final expression of this transformation. They aren't random and they aren't lucky. They are the visible evidence of who you have chosen to be consistently. When you transform yourself internally, the results that seemed impossible begin to feel inevitable, because you are no longer operating from the limitations of your past. You are operating from the strength and clarity of your upgraded identity, and the world responds accordingly. Success is built from the inside out, and the more you focus on becoming, the less you need to chase. The identity you cultivate will generate the behaviors that produce the outcomes you desire, making success not an accident, but a natural consequence of who you are. You can't outperform who you believe you are. Your internal thermostat determines the level of success you allow yourself to reach. Just like a thermostat regulates the temperature of a room, your identity regulates the level of achievement, abundance, and progress you permit yourself to experience. You might push forward for a while, turning up the heat through effort, excitement, or motivation, but if your internal setting is low, you will always return to the level you subconsciously believe is normal for you. This is why some people rise briefly, only to fall back into old patterns. Their identity never expanded to support the new results. Your internal thermostat is shaped by years of conditioning, past failures, criticism, limiting beliefs, and the environments you were raised in. Over time, these influences create an invisible boundary that defines what you think you can achieve and what you think you deserve. Even when opportunities show up, you filter them through that old identity. You downplay your abilities, underestimate your potential, and settle for less than you are capable of because your mind is loyal to the version of you it has known the longest. It is easier to return to the familiar than to step into a level of success your identity hasn't accepted yet. Whenever you try to operate above your internal setting, discomfort kicks in. Not because you aren't capable, but because your identity feels threatened by unfamiliar levels of success. You start second-guessing yourself, procrastinating, creating unnecessary drama, or finding reasons to slow down. These behaviors aren't random. They're survival mechanisms designed to pull you back to the level where your identity feels safe. The moment you break through a new level, your identity begins to whisper doubts to nudge you back into alignment with the person you used to be. People often misinterpret this discomfort as a sign that they're not ready or that something is wrong, but it is actually evidence that they are expanding beyond their internal limits. When your thermostat is set low, effort becomes exhausting because you're fighting not just the challenge, but also yourself. You're pushing forward with one hand while pulling yourself back with the other. No amount of hustle can override an identity that refuses to believe it belongs at a higher level. Until the inner setting changes, the outer results will always snap back into place. You may notice patterns in your life that repeat themselves despite your desire for change. Maybe you start strong but lose momentum, or you make progress only to sabotage it, or you achieve something meaningful but quickly find yourself drifting back to old habits. These cycles are not failures of discipline. They are reflections of identity. Your thermostat is doing exactly what it was programmed to do, protect you from the unfamiliar by guiding you back to your comfort zone, even when that comfort zone is limiting you. Raising your internal thermostat requires confronting the beliefs that keep you anchored to old levels. It demands that you question the stories you tell yourself about what is possible. You have to dismantle the narratives that say you're not good enough, not ready, not capable, or not deserving. These stories weren't born from truth, but from repetition, and you accepted them without realizing the power they held over your potential. Identity work means reclaiming the authority you unknowingly gave away to past experiences. As your internal setting begins to rise, something shifts in the way you interpret challenges. Instead of seeing obstacles as reasons to retreat, you see them as opportunities to validate your new identity. You begin taking actions that align with the higher version of yourself, even before you feel fully prepared. You start to recognize that growth always feels unfamiliar and that stretching into new levels is supposed to feel uncomfortable. You stop retreating into old patterns because they no longer match the identity you're choosing to embody. With a higher thermostat, consistency becomes easier. You don't have to fight yourself to do the things you used to resist because those actions now reinforce the person you believe you are. You begin to feel out of place, not when you're rising, but when you're settling. Mediocrity no longer feels comfortable because your identity has evolved beyond it. You naturally gravitate toward behaviors that support your new level, expanding your capacity for discipline, resilience, and long-term focus. Your results begin to transform, not because the world changed, but because you did. The opportunities were always there. You simply weren't calibrated to receive them. As your identity expands, you stop filtering success through fear and start filtering it through possibility. You make decisions from a place of confidence rather than survival. You take risks that once intimidated you. You show up with a level of intention that matches the future you are building rather than the past you are escaping. Ultimately, raising your internal thermostat means recognizing that the ceiling you keep hitting is not imposed by the world around you, but by the beliefs within you. When you shift the internal setting, the external results rise automatically because your actions no longer contradict your ambitions. You stop trying to outperform your old identity and start operating from a new one, allowing success to become a natural expression of who you are becoming rather than a struggle to force yourself into a life you don't yet believe you deserve. Winners stop negotiating with their weaknesses, excuses, and emotions. They act from commitment, not comfort. Most people spend their lives debating with themselves every time it's time to take action. They ask, do I feel like it today? Or is this the right moment? Or maybe I should wait for more clarity. Winners don't entertain those internal discussions because they know that feelings are unreliable and excuses are endless. They operate from a firm decision, not fluctuating emotions, and that decision becomes the anchor that keeps them moving even when everything inside them wants to pull back. When you negotiate with your weaknesses, you give them authority over your future. You let temporary discomfort dictate long-term outcomes. You allow fear, doubt, laziness, or uncertainty to speak louder than your goals. Winners refuse to give their weaknesses a seat at the table. They recognize those weaknesses, but they do not let them decide anything. They understand that negotiate. Ion is the birthplace of compromise, and compromise is the enemy of consistency. The moment you start bargaining with your limitations, you lose momentum. Excuses are another trap that keeps people stagnant. The mind is incredibly creative when it comes to justifying avoidance. It can dress up fear as logic, procrastination as patience, or indecision as caution. Winners see excuses for what they are, protective lies the mind tells to keep them comfortable and unchanged. Instead of entertaining excuses, they challenge them. They ask, is this a real obstacle or just a story I'm telling myself? That level of honesty is uncomfortable, but it is also liberating because it dismantles the illusions that hold most people back. Emotions are powerful, but they are terrible leaders. When you let emotions control your decisions, your life becomes inconsistent and unpredictable. Some days you feel unstoppable, and others you struggle to move at all. Winners break free from emotional dependency by choosing discipline over mood. They act whether they feel like it or not because commitment has nothing to do with emotional convenience. When you learn to act despite your feelings, you become unstoppable because nothing can hold you hostage. Commitment is the force that separates the dreamers from the achievers. It is not a feeling, it is a decision you renew daily. Commitment means you show up when you're tired, you work when you're discouraged, and you keep going when the excitement fades. It means you value the outcome more than the comfort of the moment. Winners understand that comfort is temporary, but consequences are permanent. They choose the discomfort of growth over the comfort of stagnation because they know the price of comfort is always higher in the long run. Acting from commitment creates internal strength. Every time you follow through, you build trust with yourself. You prove that you are someone who does what you said you would do, even when it's difficult. That self-trust becomes a foundation that supports bigger goals and bolder decisions. People who negotiate with their emotions weaken that foundation because they constantly break promises to themselves, and nothing destroys confidence faster than self-abandonment. Winners refuse to let that happen. Winners also understand that life responds to consistency, not intention. You can have big dreams, powerful affirmations, and elaborate plans, but without consistent action, those things remain fantasies. Commitment fuels consistency, and consistency compounds into results. When you choose commitment over comfort repeatedly, you build habits that no longer require willpower. You move from forcing action to embodying action because it becomes part of your identity. Another key to the winner's mindset is recognizing that discomfort is not a sign to stop, it is a sign to continue. Most people retreat when things become difficult, assuming something is wrong. Winners lean into discomfort because they know it is evidence of progress. They understand that every new level demands a new version of themselves, and that transition requires stretching. They welcome the discomfort because it means they are stepping into unfamiliar territory where growth happens. When you stop negotiating with your weaknesses, excuses, and emotions, you regain your power. You no longer allow internal resistance to dictate your behavior. You become someone who takes action because you said you would, not because the conditions feel perfect. You operate from a higher standard that doesn't shift based on how you feel in the moment. This level of discipline becomes a competitive advantage because most people are still waiting for motivation while winners are executing, ultimately acting from commitment mean. Acknowledging that the life you want requires a version of you that is stronger than your feelings. It means choosing purpose over comfort, resilience over convenience, and discipline over doubt. It is not the most talented or the most gifted who win. It is the ones who refuse to negotiate with anything that weakens. Because they understand that greatness is built through decisions that honor the future, not the present moment. Discomfort is not an enemy, it's the gateway to your next level and the necessary catalyst for personal growth. Most people treat discomfort like a warning sign telling them to retreat, when in reality it's an invitation to rise. Discomfort appears the moment you stretch beyond what is familiar, and that is precisely why it feels unsettling. It is not a signal that something is wrong, but evidence that you're stepping into territory you've never conquered before. Growth and comfort can't coexist, and those who run from discomfort run from their own potential without realizing it. You never evolve inside your comfort zone because the comfort zone is built around everything you already know. Everything you've already mastered, and everything that feels safe. Staying there keeps your results predictable and your identity unchanged. But every dream you have, every goal you desire, every breakthrough you're hoping for exists outside that zone. Discomfort is the bridge between who you are and who you want to become, and the moment you step onto that bridge, transformation begins. The people who achieve great things are not the ones who avoid discomfort, but the ones who embrace it as part of the process. Discomfort shows up as fear, uncertainty, doubt, or resistance. But these sensations are simply the mind's attempt to protect you from unfamiliar experiences. The mind is wired for survival, not success, and it interprets anything new as a potential threat. When you understand this, discomfort becomes less intimidating because you realize it's just an outdated survival mechanism reacting to your growth. Instead of withdrawing, you can choose to move forward with awareness, knowing that the discomfort is temporary, but the growth is lasting. Every significant milestone you've ever reached required walking through discomfort. Think about the first time you learned a new skill, started a new job, or made a difficult decision. In the beginning, it probably felt overwhelming or uncomfortable, yet once you pushed through, what once felt impossible became second nature. That pattern repeats throughout life. What is uncomfortable today becomes effortless tomorrow, but only if you're willing to persist through the initial resistance. Discomfort is a sign that you are expanding, not failing. People often misinterpret discomfort as a sign that they are not ready or that they're on the wrong path. In reality, discomfort is proof that they are exactly where they need to be. When you pursue growth, you will always encounter new challenges that stretch your identity, discipline, and resilience. The stronger the challenge, the greater the growth. Winners understand this instinctively. They don't seek discomfort for pain's sake, but they welcome it as a necessary part of stepping into bigger opportunities. They know that their capacity increases only when they are pushed beyond what feels easy. Your relationship with discomfort determines how quickly you grow. If you avoid it, you slow your progress and repeat the same cycles. If you face it, you accelerate your evolution and unlock abilities you didn't know you had. Discomfort forces you to think differently, act differently, and show up differently. It reveals your weaknesses and strengths, exposing the areas that need development and sharpening the strengths that will carry you forward. Without discomfort, you wouldn't have the pressure needed to refine your potential into power. As you begin to embrace discomfort, your confidence increases. You start to realize that you are capable of handling far more than you once believed. You become less reactive to challenges and more proactive in your pursuit of growth. The situations that once scared you lose their power because you've trained yourself to move through them rather than hide from them. With each new challenge you conquer, your identity expands, and your belief in yourself deepens. Confidence isn't built in comfort, it's built in the moments you choose courage over ease. Discomfort also teaches discipline. When you push through tasks you don't feel like doing, you strengthen the part of you that leads your life instead of the part that follows your feelings. You learn to rely on commitment rather than emotion, and that shift changes everything. Discipline grows stronger every time you override the impulse to quit, and discomfort is the environment where discipline is sculpted. Without challenge, discipline has nothing to sharpen itself against. When you stop running from discomfort, opportunities start revealing themselves in ways they never did before. You begin to spot possibilities where you once saw problems. You take risks that once felt impossible. You pursue challenges that others avoid. The world responds differently to someone who is willing to step into the unfamiliar because that person radiates capability and strength. Discomfort begins to feel less like an obstacle and more like a compass, pointing you directly toward your next level. Ultimately, discomfort is the catalyst that turns potential into power. It is the arena where growth takes place, the environment where character is developed, and the space where transformation becomes real. Those who embrace die. Discomfort rise faster, grow stronger, and unlock versions of themselves that comfort would have never revealed. Breakthroughs happen when you shift from waiting for external solutions to taking full responsibility and becoming the person capable of winning. Most people spend years hoping something outside of them will change, hoping for better circumstances, better timing, better support, or better opportunities, without realizing that this mindset keeps them powerless. As long as you're waiting, you're not building. As long as you're expecting life to shift on its own, you never shift into the identity required to create your own breakthroughs. The moment you take responsibility, you regain the authority you unknowingly gave away. Waiting for external solutions creates a cycle of stagnation. You convince yourself that progress is just one piece of advice, one mentor, one lucky break, or one more piece of information away. But breakthroughs don't come from accumulation, they come from activation. Many people already know what they need to do, but they stay stuck because they're hoping someone else will spark the transformation for them. Responsibility breaks that pattern by forcing you to stop leaning on outside forces and start leaning on your own capacity to lead your life. When you take full responsibility, you stop blaming circumstances and start shaping them. You stop pointing to the obstacles around you and start examining the patterns within you. You begin to realize that your results are not reflections of what happened to you, but reflections of how you responded. This shift is powerful because it places the future back into your hands. You no longer see yourself as a victim of conditions, but as the creator of outcomes. And that mindset is where breakthroughs begin. Responsibility also forces you to confront the gap between your current identity and your desi. Red results. You start to see that the version of you who wants the dream may not yet be the version of you who can sustain it. This is not an insult. It's an invitation. An invitation to grow into someone who thinks bigger, acts bolder, and holds themselves to a higher standard. Breakthroughs don't happen when your environment changes. They happen when your identity elevates to match the life you want. Taking responsibility eliminates excuses because you no longer have anything outside yourself to blame. You stop saying I would if and start saying I will. Excuses lose their power because responsibility demands honesty. It forces you to acknowledge when you're operating below your potential, when you are avoiding hard decisions, or when you're allowing fear to guide your choices. This honest self-assessment becomes fuel for growth because you can't change what you're unwilling to confront. When you stop waiting for someone to give you permission, you begin to act with a level of authority that shifts everything. You take risks you used to avoid. You make decisions instead of hesitating. You follow through instead of starting and stopping. Responsibility builds momentum because action creates clarity, confidence, and direction. Every step you take reinforces the identity of someone who leads their life instead of drifting through it. Breakthroughs also happen when you realize that external solutions can help, but they cannot replace internal ownership. Coaching, training, tools, and strategies amplify your abilities, but they cannot substitute for your willingness to change. People often look for shortcuts, hoping the right method will save them from doing the internal work. but true transformation requires both strategy and self-evolution. Responsibility ensures that when strategy arrives, you are prepared to use it. Taking responsibility strengthens your resilience. When you know your progress depends on you, setbacks don't feel like dead ends, they feel like challenges to overcome. You stop collapsing under pressure and start adapting, learning, adjusting, and rising. You become harder to break because you no longer depend on perfect conditions, you depend on your ability to respond, persevere, and improve. This resilience becomes a defining trait of someone who consistently achieves breakthroughs. As you step into responsibility, you stop searching for external validation. You begin trusting your own decisions, your own standards, and your own direction. You become the kind of person who sets the tone rather than waiting for the world to set it for you. This internal certainty gives you a decisive edge because confidence grows when responsibility becomes your default mode. You start showing up differently, more focused, more intentional, and more committed to your future. Ultimately, breakthroughs happen when you stop waiting for life to shift and start shifting yourself. When you stop expecting answers to fall into your lap and start becoming the person capable of creating answers. When you stop looking for a savior and start recognizing that the person you need is the one you are becoming through responsibility, discipline, and intentional action.